The options for photographing food are endless. It's an incredibly visual subject. One thing to remember is that food photography is just like any other photography. The same principles apply: light, color, and composition. I realize that the discussion of different types of photography may not really help you, but it may answer a few questions regarding the profession of food photography. The role of the food stylist is to make the food look attractive in the finished photograph. The main difference between how a home cook or chef may present food and what a stylist does is the time and effort a stylist takes to carefully and artfully arrange the food. Also required is the visual know-how and ability to translate the perception of taste, aroma, and appeal that one gets from an actual dish to a two-dimensional photograph. This is my studio in Toronto, Ontario. It was over 2,500 square feet with 2 studios, 2 fully equipped kitchens, darkroom, office, workshop, and a storage room for props and equipment. I had 5 full-time employees. This is the main studio kitchen. And this is the client area on a raised platform so they could overlook the action. This door divided the studios so we could have 2 separate studios with kitchens or 1 large one. This door came from Talius, a company in Salmon Arm. And this is the second studio with its own kitchen. Basically, there are 5 main types of food photography: press releases, editorial and cookbooks, location, packaging, and advertising. Press releases. Food companies want you to buy their products, and one way to do this is by supplying newspapers and magazines with photographs and recipes, some in color and some in black and white. We would do press releases for companies like Uncle Ben's Rice, General Foods, Kraft, New Zealand Spring Lamb, Foodland Ontario, Pork Board of Canada, to name a few. Here we show you how we do a barbecue set for a press release. This shot is for the Pork Board of Canada. This is a barbecue that we have cut the bottom out and bolted a piece of opaque plexiglass to it. And by adding colored gels and lava stones, we're able to create a hot-cold look without the heat. Heat waves would distort the photographic image. The photographer's assistant is a very important member of the crew. He or she assembles and disassembles the sets, helps the food stylist and prop person bring their stuff into the studio, loads the film into the camera, and delivers the film to the lab. Here, Assistant Lauren Hamilton is setting up a typical barbecue set. On this shot, we are going to be in fairly close, so we only need to do a small set. Lauren was my #1 assistant and was with me for about 4 years. On larger assignments, we would hire freelance assistants to help out. Here the barbecue set is almost finished with Lauren putting the grill on. I roll the camera in position, and you will notice that we don't have any light stands for our lighting. All of our lighting is on a track system on the ceiling of the studio. This way no one will be tripping over cords or light stands. This set calls for a sunlight look, so I bring in the sun. We use warming gels on our lights to simulate warm sunlight. The food stylist brings the food from the kitchen and places it on the grill. I hardly ever have to touch the food. This is the food stylist's responsibility. The food is almost always styled in the kitchen before coming to the set. Next, I bring in mini stands to hold the reflecting mirrors and the reflecting material. Because sunlight is such a harsh light, we use mirrors and gold cards to soften the shadows. Lauren attaches the basting brush to a holder and places it on the food. And here is the shot. The barbecue looks like it's hot, but in fact it's stone cold, but the illusion works. The barbecue smoke is produced by using incense cones. It works every time. These smoking cones are placed on different areas of the coals to simulate the working barbecue. It also makes the studio smell nice. Editorial and cookbooks. This is the type of photography that most food photographers love the most. The most important thing is making a beautiful image. Instead of needing to communicate Heinz's hot, moist, meaty, abundant, corn-fed ground meat stew, you just need to make the viewer say, "Wow, I want to make that." So far, my food images have been used in 32 cookbooks produced by Canadian Living and have sold over 5 million copies in Canada. This kind of a shot usually makes lighting the big issue of the photo. Yeah, it has to be well composed and beautifully styled and nicely cropped, but if the lighting isn't spectacular, the shot ends up being just so-so. Here we are shooting a how-to cooking class article for Canadian Living magazine. We use a professional hand model and shoot over her shoulder so the shot is from the reader's point of view. We would shoot 5 days a month for Canadian Living and do about 4 photographs per day. This cooking lesson is about barbecuing vegetables. In the world of professional food photography, the picture is created not by an individual but by a team. This team consists of the following personnel: the photographer, his photo assistant, the food stylist and assistant, the prop stylist, the art director, and of course the client. The most important team member as far as I'm concerned is the food stylist. She, most are women, is the one that makes the food look great for the camera. As a food photographer, my job is to make sure that the client and the rest of the team are happy campers. Sometimes the experience of the shoot is as important as the actual photos that you are ending up producing. Theoretically, the photographer is in charge. In reality, he or she is about 4th or 5th down the chain of command. Basically, my job as a photographer, other than client relations, smoothing, is to make the initial lens selection, determine depth of field, and to artistically apply the lighting. As the shoot goes on, the photographer's job is to work with the team to refine the shot in such a way that as many team members as possible end up happy with the final results. Of course, there are members of the team whose opinions are more important than others, like the guy with the checkbook, for example. It's not easy for a food stylist to move around a set with the lights, reflector stands, tripod, and camera. This is an article about sandwiches, so we decided to shoot it on a wooden cutting board sitting on white tile. And here's how the photo appeared in the magazine. This is our prop and equipment room. It supplies both studios with lighting gear and a ton of props. We had collected a number of props over the years: dishes, serving platters, drinking glasses, cutting boards, to name a few. Here I'm picking a background platform for a shot. We have a variety of backgrounds including tiles, slate, cloth, weathered barn boards, stones, a lot of stuff. This set required a fall look for a preserving article, so I decided the article would be best illustrated by using a table in front of a window looking out to a backyard. The background mural is bought from a wallpaper store with branches attached to light stands to give us the look. Lighting is very important. With this set, we are simulating warm, late afternoon sunlight coming through a window. We are using 3 lights to accomplish this. Here I'm gluing leaves to the branches for the fall look. All of these props for this set come from our own property. I always like the 3D look when doing a set like this one. We could have just used a mural, but by putting in some branches and then hot gluing fall leaves on them gave the set a real look. Your Canadian Living food editor, Elizabeth Baird, is looking through the camera. This shot we are using a 4x5 view camera and shooting film. Remember film? Art director Vicki Elson and Elizabeth discussed the Polaroid. We would always shoot Polaroids before we shoot film. Canadian Living was a great client to work with. We shot their first issue in December 1975 and continued shooting for them until I left Toronto for Salmon Arm in September of 1994. Yes, it takes only 3 seconds for a customer to buy a magazine. For Canadian Living, we would shoot 2 covers each month, which were then researched by placing them in front of a focus group to find out which one they would go with. Here, assistant Lauren Hamilton is getting a set ready for a cover shot. Most covers were shot on a cloth background, and here Lauren is stretching the cloth on a sheet of arborite to keep it smooth. Then he will lift the cloth and the arborite up on a bar to create a sweep. This is an acetate copy of the cover showing us where the type or copy will be. We then place it on the camera. You may notice that when it is placed on the camera it is upside down. That is because view cameras have no mirrors to write the image, so everything is viewed upside down. This makes photographers a little weird, I think. This shot we're using an 8x10 view camera with film. This is an optical light which can give you a pinpoint of light directed to wherever you need it. Here we are highlighting the side of the dish. By turning the light on and off, you can see the effect. Here you can see the acetate on an 8x10 inch Polaroid. Food stylist Olga Trushin prepares the dish in the kitchen. Olga is one of Canada's top food stylists and a great person to work with. She oils the dish and then puts foil around the edges so the bread doesn't burn when in the oven. Olga makes about $650 a day and is in great demand. Canadian Living would hire Olga to style their food for the camera. She would work closely with the magazine test kitchen staff, and sometimes one of the staff would assist her in the studio. Canadian Living's recipes always worked because they were well tested before they were brought to the studio. When the dish is finished in the oven, she brings it out and adds more oil to the bread. This will help with the highlights. She then lights a propane torch and gives the dish that light brown look. Don't you do that to all your baked dishes? She then brings the dish to the set and we photograph it. Location photography. Because we always shoot 6 months ahead for Canadian Living, we would be doing the Christmas issue in July, and most times we would rent a house that had lots of good areas for shooting, like this one. We will be shooting 16 photographs for 2 Christmas issues for December. Here, assistant Patty Heinzman is setting the lighting. This location was great for us because they had a lot of good country furniture. Weeks before the shoot, prop stylist Debbie Boyden would visit the location to suggest possible areas within the house to best illustrate the stories. This area had a grand piano and would be perfect for a New Year's dessert article. Art director Deborah Fadden discusses props with food stylist Jennifer McLagan and prop stylist Debbie Boyden and food editor Elizabeth Baird. The props or background in food photography can be a very important element of success. Not having the right prop can mean the difference between success and failure. The correct prop or background will help set the mood of the photograph. Highlight keying and low-key props can be a recipe for confusion and disaster. Many times a food photography shoot, the entire team isn't happy with the shot and no one really knows why. In these cases, propping is usually the problem. The propping is the thread that ties everything together. The color, texture, and style of the props must complement the food for the concept of the photograph to make sense to the subconscious of the viewer. In the kitchen, the girls are busy getting the food ready, and Debbie is putting up shears to cover some of the windows. Meanwhile, Patty Heinzman is placing pine branches on light stands to cover a green hedge, which I will cover with spray snow for the winter look. Of course, it is summer and the article is a winter theme. Although we don't have the ceiling height for our lights like in our studio, we still make do. Locations are still a lot better than building sets, and they give you realism. I would venture to say that on all shoots, not everyone gets his or her way, but the important thing is that the end result is consistently excellent. You need the trust and the rest of your team members. So we have to create a winter theme. We attach a sheet of sheer fabric behind the branches that Patty put in place to cover the green hedge. And here's the final spread. Elizabeth and Debbie go over the props for the next photograph. Even though the house that we are shooting in has a great selection of props, Debbie still has to bring a number of her own. A lot of people have asked me how I became a food photographer. Well, it all started in 1975 when an art director asked if I would do a food photograph for him. Now you have to remember that in the photography business, shooting food for most photographers was scary. I knew I needed a food stylist, so I found a few photographers who specialized in food to get their names. All of them said most of the good ones may be busy, but I could try Carol Ferguson, who was a great food stylist but a bitch to work with. Well, all of the stylists were busy except for Carol. Carol turned out to be a perfectionist, not a bitch. She said she really enjoyed working with me and would like to do it again someday. She phoned me about a month later and asked if I would do a food shoot with her for a new magazine called Canadian Living, and the rest is history. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, the food stylists are busy preparing chickens. For photography, chickens are only partially cooked, just enough so the skin stays tight, and then painted with kitchen bouquet. And Debbie is prepping the set. Jennifer adds some last-minute touches to the soup. We light the fireplace and we do the shot. The rest of the project goes smoothly. Here we are shooting in front of a fireplace, which creates its own problems. You have to do a double exposure, one for the fireplace and one for the food. Doing the food photographs for Canadian Living magazine was great advertising for me. Even though it was less money than shooting for advertising clients, the food corporations all advertised in Canadian Living and saw my photos every month. I never needed a sales staff because the companies would call me direct to quote on their next project. Food doesn't keep its appetizing look for long, so as a photographer you need to be well prepared and able to shoot quickly after it's been cooked before it melts, collapses, wilts, or changes color. This means being prepared and knowing what you want to achieve before the food arrives. One strategy that some use is to have the shot completely set up with props before the food is ready and then substitute a stand-in plate to get your exposure right. Then when the food is ready, you just switch the stand-in plate with the real thing and you're ready to start shooting. Packaging. Of the three types of food photography, packaging tends to be the most technical, tedious, and anal-retentive type of food photography. It is not unusual in a packaging shoot to actually count the number of peas shown on the plate. The government has strict rules concerning packaging. The photograph must not exaggerate what the product will look like. Lighting must be relatively flat to show maximum detail, and there is definitely not room for special effects. The photographer's job is to show the food in a realistic, favorable way. An art director and a layout will be supplied, and you are expected to match the layout to the best of your ability. This next section is a project for Maple Leaf Mills. We have to produce 8 new photographs for cake packages. Each slice has to be in exactly the same position on each package. Here, food stylist Claire Horsley is building slice on a 2-layer cake using a plastic mold that we had someone make for us. Here's the plastic mold. She would slice pieces of cake and place icing down the center, the side facing the camera and the back. Most details of the shoot regarding cropping, propping, and backgrounds will be predetermined. The photographer's input and creativity will be put on the back burner. Most of the time of the shoot will be spent poking very small details and dropping images into layouts to see if everything fits just right. Please don't get me wrong, it still beats working for a living. But of all the types of food photography, this kind of work is the toughest. This is the final package. Part of the project was shooting chocolate squares. I know this looks like something out of a science fiction movie, but these snaking lines are fiber optic cables from a special light to light small sections of the chocolate squares. Styling food for packaging is tedious work, and Claire has baked about 20 squares for the shoot. Claire has to measure each square carefully before she cuts them. When you are shooting for packaging, the art director from the design firm is always on set looking through the camera and tweaking the props. Most food photographs are shot from an angle of about 45 degrees, as if you're sitting at a table with the food in front of you. This is a project for Kellogg's Pop-Tarts. It called for a reveal shot to show the interior of the Pop-Tart. We are shooting here with a wide-angle setup on the 4x5 view camera. The focus of food photography for packaging is that the food should be clear and should have as much detail as possible. Since the photograph is used on a package of a product, it is important to show exactly what is in the box and nothing more. The color, the number of pieces, and the product itself should be shown as realistically as possible. Legal technicalities are carefully considered here, and being aware of laws and legal issues is helpful. The food stylist uses a mold to cut the front of the Pop-Tart to reveal the jam inside. Using a pick instrument, she then breaks up the smooth surface left by the knife. The client is sent us cases of the product to choose from. My kids loved it when I would go home with all the rejects. Prop stylist Janet Walkinshaw has hand-picked the pieces of fruit that we'll use as props for the shoot. She has purchased and hand-picked bushels of apples, boxes of strawberries, cherries, and raspberries. Quite often we will do a separate shot of the props to be added later by the designer. This fresh fruit is props for flavor enhancing in the Pop-Tart packaging. This is our Polaroid display wall, so we can show the progress of the photo shoot. This is an artist drawing of a vegetable cocktail drink label that we were asked to produce a photo for. The client approved the concept and wants the photograph to be exactly as the layout. Because it is liquid that we have to be photographing, the set has to be level. Here Assistant David Field does that. This will be a two-part photo, one for the glass and one for the vegetable contents. Here David sets up for the background shot. Again, the designer will combine the drink shot with the background shot for the finished label. The reason we do two shots is because of focus. It would be almost impossible to keep the glass and food props in focus using a view camera. Advertising. This type of food photography tends to be less tedious than packaging, but still can be quite restrictive because of the layout parameters. This next project is for Loeb, a chain of grocery stores out of Ottawa, Ontario. It requires a number of in-store posters to promote their new cola. We are working to strict layouts. The art director has sold his bosses on ideas that need to be reproduced almost exactly as they were presented. This is a very difficult bottle to shoot because the label is silver foil, which makes it highly reflective, so we need lots of white card for reflectors. We need to produce a cold and refreshing look to the photograph, hence the ice and the blue backgrounds. We will use real and plastic ice here. Someone, usually an art director or possibly a designer, has a predetermined idea of what the end result will look like. There is usually a layout and everyone expects that final shot to end up looking very close to the artist's illustration. This is a large plastic ice cube that I made from a piece of acrylic by grinding and polishing it. It will be a double exposure, one for the 6-pack of bottles and one for the ice cube. We have set up 2 view cameras to accomplish the effect. We shoot the bottles on a black background and have placed black cards in the back of the ice block so the bottles will show through on the double exposure. We do a test exposure with Polaroid to see if everything lines up before we start the final shots. Advertising photography is 10% photography and 90% engineering. We use dry ice to create a frosty look by pouring water into the dry ice. This next poster requires a hand model to simulate pulling 2 cold bottles of Coke out of ice. Safety is a concern here because the hand model will be laying on scaffolding and we will have water spraying the back of the bottles. Here are the nozzles that will spray the water. They are hooked up to a garden hose with a shut-off valve for the spray action. Here David preps the stand for the bottles. We use the stand so the bottles are always in the same position between shots. This stand will be painted black and placed out of the camera view and covered with plastic ice and real ice. Assistant Lauren Hamilton preps the set. We have set up water spraying nozzles to hit the back of the bottles to help the effect, and because water and electronics don't get along, we have covered the set in plastic drop sheets. We will be taking about 50 to 60 shots when the hand model arrives, and out of that number of shots we will probably end up with a half dozen really good ones. Now we hot glue pieces of plastic ice together. I now spritz the bottles with a mixture of white corn syrup and water to simulate condensation to give that bottle the cool look. Real ice is added to build the background. Derek Kerwin, a professional hand model, climbs onto the scaffolding. And we do the shooting. ready? Camera ready?
Ready? Ready?
After a half day of getting ready and testing, the shot is done. Loeb sold a lot of their product with the in-store promotion.
Ready?
3, 2, 1, go. Here's a project for Bailey's. It is a pour shot which is always difficult to accomplish. A pour shot requires perfect timing. So to do this, we rig a tube and a funnel just outside the camera view. Since we only get one chance on each shot, we have to constantly clean the glass and change the plastic ice cubes. Here we are using a strip light, a long and narrow light to give a band of highlight down the glass. As I said before, a pour shot is tricky and requires precise timing. By the time we are done, we will have spent the best part of a day on the project. I pour the liquid and the shot is done. I put a plug in the tube so it doesn't drip on the background. Lauren preps another glass and the shoot carries on. We will shoot 40 images so the client can pick the best one. And here's the final photograph. This next project is for Kraft General Foods. They want to showcase their vegetable recipes. We have hired an artist to paint the canvas background for this project. Clients liked my studio. It was easy to get to and had lots of parking. It was on ground level, so the stylists and prop people didn't have any stairs to contend with when they brought in their stuff. The kitchen had a large skylight and was well lit. Prop stylist Debbie Boyden discusses props with food stylist Evelyn Hula. Food corporations spend a lot of money on advertising. We were kept constantly busy working with them on their projects. There was never a day when I didn't want to go to work. Shooting food for me was play, not work. Something else that was great about shooting food, you got to take a lot of food home. To darken the background, we place a black card over part of the set to drop off the light. By doing this, it leaves room for the art director to reverse type in white out of the black background, and it also visually shows the food forward. All of the food stylists that I work with love my kitchen. There was lots of counter space and state-of-the-art appliances. Food photography is generally done with studio strobe lighting. The reason food photographers use strobes is that they are cool and do not affect the temperature of the food. Here, Evelyn applies last-minute touches to the food. I've enjoyed my career as a food photographer. I've had a chance to work with some really great talented people. I'm still in contact with some of them. I've been a photographer since 1964 and have worked in large studios and have been my own boss since 1974. I own the rights to all the shots I did for Canadian Living, and every time they use one, I get paid again. Canadian Living magazine will still be remembered as my #1 client. I produced over 5,000 food images for them and have copies of each one, and when I look back on them, I can honestly say that I've enjoyed every one. Thank you.